I'm back today with step 2 of a 3-part series that we're doing on the process of buying a house. Now, the previous video, we talked about the process of getting pre-approved and starting showings for your home. Today, we're really going to focus on what happens after you're under contract. In the business, we call this contract to close, this period between we found a house that we wrote an offer on until we're closed and we have the keys. What happens in between? And for a lot of buyers, this is no man's land. This is the gray area. This is the time when you're kind of checking in with your realtor or wishing your realtor would check in with you because you just want to know what's going on. Do you need something from me? And sort of what happens next? Where are we in this process? Here's an overview of sort of what is going on behind the scenes during that time. The first day that we get you under contract on a home, we're going to have a few steps that we take care of right away. First and foremost, we're going to make sure that we get the earnest money deposit. That comes with your offer. It is included in the contract itself, and it goes into escrow, either with the listing broker or with the buying broker. Sometimes it might be held by a title company, but typically it's with either the listing agent or the buyer agent, and it's going to sit in escrow. So we have to get that deposit from the buyer pretty quickly, usually about 48 hours. We want to make sure that we have that into escrow. So the good faith deposit is simply that. It's just a deposit that secures the property in your name while we are going through this contract to close process. It lets the seller know that you're serious. It's what keeps you, the buyer, from making offers on houses all over the city. And it really is just what we call consideration to accompany your offer. Look, here's my offer. Look, here's what I'm putting behind it to show that I'm serious. When you go to close on the home, that money would come back to you either in the form of a check that you just get the check right back, or it is credited toward the settlement for what you owe at closing. The next thing we want to do is we want to get you scheduled for your home inspections right away. Now, typically the offer is going to include language that has a timeline for how long you have to be contingent on your inspection. Contingent means that you can check out the house and decide to move forward or to step back and terminate your contract. You are contingent upon what you find in that inspection. Okay, so your contingency will last some number of days. In our market, it's typical to see that between 5 and 15 days. And that's when we would have your home inspection and make that decision about whether you were going to move forward with the home or whether you're going to step back and terminate the contract on the basis of what you found in that home inspection. There are multiple home inspectors in every single market. Talk with your realtor and get some recommendations for some, or talk to your friends and neighbors who have recently bought and sold. They may have a great recommendation for a home inspector in your area. Most home inspectors are used to that turnaround time of 5 to 15 days in our market. And so there are usually plenty of opportunities available for you to get something booked within a week or so. And then the third step is that we would submit that day your contract that is now signed by all parties to your lender so that they can start the underwriting process for your loan. So all three of those things happen straight away. We collect the good faith deposit, we book your home inspection, and we submit your contract to your loan officer for underwriting, all within the very first day of being under contract. So it's real crazy on the first day, and then it gets quiet. So what happens next is that typically your loan officer is going to start asking you questions, getting your file complete so that they can submit your file to underwriting. It's really crucial that when your loan officer asks you for a document or asks you a question, that you get back to them as quickly as you possibly can, and at the very least within 24 hours. They are working on the timeline established in the contract. So if we have 30 days to get this closed, they have laid out a plan to get this closed in 30 days. Sometimes you will write an offer that tells you exactly what date you're all going to try to close on, and sometimes you have an open-ended contract that just says, we're gonna make closing happen sometime in the next 30 to 45 days or the next 30 to 60 days. They don't necessarily allow for you to take 3 or 4 days to get back to them. They really need the answers pretty quickly. Of course, if you have an extenuating circumstance or need to get a document that you don't have your hands on, then there's no hard and fast rule. We just want you to continue to move forward as quickly as you possibly can. While they are gathering those initial documents from you and getting your loan prepared to go to underwriting, we are then going to have your home inspection. Home inspection itself typically will take anywhere from 2 to 3, 4 hours, something like that, depending on who your inspector is, how many people they bring, and how exhaustive you have asked for the inspection process to be. Inspections, typically there's a base package and then you can add on additional inspections. For example, I always recommend a termite inspection. You might consider a radon test to see if there's radon in the property. You might decide that you want to have a mold inspection. Some home inspection companies will do a sewer scope. There are several different add-ons, so depending on how many things you add on to that base home inspection, that can determine how long the inspection process takes. On the day of your inspection, your home inspector really mostly needs to be moving through the house pretty quickly. They have a set schedule and they have a checklist of things that they go through. So they're going to be moving through the property. But you as the buyer are welcome to attend the inspection. I tell my buyers, use that time to measure things that you want to measure, to look at paint if you're going to consider paint, to think about what your life in that home is going to be like. Really use that time to wander around. You've got the time to be there, and buyers are welcome to attend. At the end of the home inspection, your inspector will pull us all aside and talk to us about the findings. You will get a fully written out report with photos in it shortly after your inspection, but that's your face time with the inspector. And I usually tell people allow for about 30 minutes of real face time with that inspector at the end of your inspection so that you can get your questions asked, so that you can hear directly from him exactly what's going on, whereas reading it later in a report might be unclear or confusing. So you really get your opportunity to see what's going on and ask questions in that moment. Most home inspectors, of course, don't care if you call them after the fact for clarification, but that is really crucial FaceTime if you can be there to attend that home inspection. After your home inspection is complete, there may be a request for repairs that goes back to the seller. That's something you would work with your real estate agent on, and all of that happens within the contingency timeframe that is outlined in your contract. So if you have a 10-day inspection contingency in your contract, that means you have 10 days to have all of your home inspections complete. And if there's a repair request that is being sent to the seller, that has to be sent before that end of the 10th day. In the meantime, while your loan officer is working on underwriting your loan and we are going through this inspection process, your loan officer will have submitted your contract to a local title company. Most often they'll work with you and identify who that title company is going to be. But a title company will work in the county that you're buying the home to find the title to the property and make sure that it is clean and clear of any liens. So all of these things are happening simultaneously. They're all happening with different parties. We call this our real estate team. You have your realtor, you have your loan officer, you have the underwriting staff that is working behind the scenes with your loan officer, and you have the title company. At the Symphony Group, we have contract to close support, one person who is working behind the scenes to make sure everybody's always on the same page at the same time. And that's the person who's sending out updates to our client. We've heard this from the loan officer. We've heard this from the title company. Inspections are now complete. It's just a little bit of a chess game to make sure everything's in the right place at the right time and making sure that you're both updated and that we have everything that we need from you. Typically, after your home inspection is complete would be the appraisal process. If you're getting a loan through a bank or through a mortgage broker, you're going to have an appraisal on the home. The lender will more than likely work with you to get payment for that appraisal in advance. Appraisals in our market typically run about $500. The appraiser is going to spend about an hour walking through the property, the home itself, and the surrounding area. They're going to be measuring the home, taking photos of the home, and they're going to pull comparable properties from recent sales to determine the value of the property today. Now, the reason that makes a difference, then I say value and not price, because the price is what's in the contract that you've offered to pay. You've offered to pay a price. The appraiser is determining the value of the property. That's what the bank is willing to say the property is worth. And sometimes those are the same number and everybody's happy, and sometimes they're not the same number. An appraisal can determine that your price that you're paying is less than the appraisal value, in which case you're walking into instant equity, and that's everybody's dream, right? And sometimes the appraisal will determine that the value of the property is lower than what you've agreed to pay in your contract. Sometimes our contracts will allow for the buyer to pay the difference. If the property appraises at less than the contract price, the buyer can pay to make up for that. And sometimes we have to renegotiate the price because the bank is not able or willing to underwrite a higher price in the contract against the value of the home. At the end of the day, this is the collateral for your loan, and so the bank isn't willing to give more money than what the value of the property is. Now, if you're paying cash, of course, you don't have to have an appraisal. You can elect to have an appraisal, and you can also elect to have a contingency for appraisal. Electing to have an appraisal just means you're going to have one. Electing to have a contingency means that you want this contract to be contingent on what that appraisal says, and then determine whether or not you're going to move forward with the contract on the basis of what that appraisal value comes in at. There may be a second negotiation here that happens depending on what the appraisal value is compared to what our contract price is. If those two things are the same and we're in alignment, we just continue to coast forward and everything is fine. After we finish the appraisal process, it may take another week or two to wrap up underwriting. That appraisal has to go through underwriting as well. So it takes another week or two to get us to what's called cleared to close. Cleared to close is the celebration day. That means that we've all done our jobs and we've made it to the point where we can close. You will receive a closing disclosure from your lender. That's going to detail all of the numbers that are part of the transaction, everything from the purchase price of the house to how much your closing costs are, real estate taxes, your homeowner's insurance. All of those numbers are going to come together in that closing disclosure, and they're going to show you what is called cash to close. Cash to close is the amount of money that you have to bring to the closing table that day. Now in Kentucky, you can bring that either as a certified check or it can be wired directly to the title company. In Indiana, if that amount is more than $10,000, it has to be wired to the title company. Only if it's less than $10,000 can you bring a certified check. Under no circumstances can you bring a personal check for any amount to closing. They have to be certified funds from the bank. That's something to keep in mind. So typically we don't get that closing disclosure until a day or so before the closing happens. So just know that as we're getting close to your closing date, we're still waiting on that final number. And sometimes it's down to the wire because we're down to the day and we're trying to figure out what that exact closing date is going to be so that we can prorate everything correctly as far as taxes and insurance are concerned. Typically in the final day before closing, we will get a full settlement statement from the title company that will show essentially the same information that's on your closing disclosure, but it will show both the seller side and the buyer's side. That comes to me first, and I review that completely for accuracy to make sure it matches the contract, to make sure it matches any amendments or addendums that have been made to the contract over the past few days, and to make sure that it is correct and accurate. And once I've confirmed that everything looks great, then I send it to you. You confirm that it matches what you saw on your closing disclosure, and we're all set for closing. Stay tuned for our next segment about what the closing process looks like. I know this is a big question for a lot of people, especially if you've never been at this table before. You're going to want to know, what does closing really look like? For more content like this, make sure that you like and follow the Symphony Group. For questions about this process or start your own purchase process, email us at symphonyrealtygroup@gmail.com.